Well, we are, family environments together. Unless you just genuinely being awful. The place that talks about there's no possibility.
Good evening, Lake Forest, and welcome to the February 20th, 2018 session of Lake Forest City Council. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Certainly. Honorable Mayor Lansing.
Here.
Alderman Beidler.
Here.
Alderman Morris.
Here.
Alderman Newman is absent. Alderman Rummel.
Here.
Alderman Tack.
Here.
Alderman Reisenberg.
Here.
Alderman Moreno.
Here.
Alderman Bushman.
Here.
Mr. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Will you all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item of business is comments from the mayor. This evening, there are several matters I'd like to mention pertaining to the West Rail Corridor and its safety. First, I want to acknowledge the good efforts of the Action Group to sponsor an information forum recently at Gorton that included 4 Lake Forest aldermen. Getting relevant, accurate information on issues to citizens is always a vital civic activity. For the same purpose, Glenview will host a forum on a potential third track on Monday, March 12th, 7 o'clock at Glenbrook South High School Auditorium. There's a slide there for you to see. Residents and city officials are encouraged to attend to hear information on the anticipated impacts of a third track, as well as interest in a related freight impact study, and to challenge the cost-benefit of a third track. Many important issues are posed by a potential third track which have been made known to officials, most importantly to those with authority and control over rail matters. The council anticipates the release of environmental assessment findings this spring so that Lake Forest can work together with the other communities affected along the rail corridor to prepare appropriate workable responses to the environmental assessment. As noted previously, I'm not aware of a single Lake Forest City Council member in favor of a third track. More information is being added to the City of Lake Forest website pertaining to the West Rail Corridor, so please monitor this as part of keeping up with developments on rail issues affecting Lake Forest. The one overarching issue regarding Lake Forest rail corridors is safety. To this end, several steps in the right direction are being taken, providing substantive improvement for Lake Foresters. One is the installation of positive train control systems on all passenger and freight equipment that has been underway for a few years and is planned to be completed nationally by the end of 2019. This is a GPS directed system that permits all rail traffic to, in effect, talk to each other, and when conflicts in location, speed, and so forth occur, automatically slow and stop the conflicted trains. Many observers consider this the single greatest advance in rail safety since the introduction of the air brake in 1872. And I invite you all who are interested about rail safety to really look at the structure of and the purposes and the intents of this positive train control system. It really is a very big change coming in safety. Further to safety, bringing an Amtrak stop into being in Lake Forest requires 2 substantial and meaningful safety measures. One is the construction of a pedestrian underpass at the West Lake Forest Station. In view of safety problems in the vicinity of the station over several years involving at times death, the sooner this underpass is constructed, the better. Construction of an underpass makes an Amtrak stop possible, thereby creating the second material advance in safety. The requirement for Amtrak trains traversing Lake Forest to slow down and come to a complete stop instead of whistling through Lake Forest at 60 to 80 miles an hour, as they do now and will continue to do unless there is a stop. Given the miles required to slow and accelerate a high-speed intercity passenger train, the reduction in speed and resulting increase in safety, particularly in the vicinity of West Lake Forest, is substantial and an important safety step to make. As stated before, there is no known operational requirement for a third track in connection with the incremental addition of Amtrak service in the West Rail Corridor. This is further evidenced in Metro's recent release of its capital spending plans for the next few years. Last week, the Federal Railway Administration released its plans for initiating a new grants program specifically for rail safety that carries the acronym CRISI, Comprehensive Rail Infrastructure Safety Improvements. The city is in the early stages of organizing to apply for a CRISI grant, as pedestrian underpasses are a core safety concept. A key part of such grant programs is local participation in funding from local, county, state, and private corporate entities interested in rail safety and enhanced passenger service. When more is understood about the CRISI program and funding potential, there will be a full discussion at City Council. We should all look forward to the day when passengers and pedestrians can use the station without having to cross tracks, while enjoying the benefits of enhanced passenger service and the economic health of improved residential and commercial property values in the vicinity, as demonstrated across the United States in hundreds of towns and cities. With that, comments from the city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have no comments this evening.
Okay, next, comments by council members.
I have a
Yeah,
couple of
I've got a
comments.
couple comments, too.
You want to go ahead?
Okay.
Alderman Rommel.
I was in attendance at the Action Committee meeting a couple of Sundays ago, and again, thank you for organizing it. I thought it was very well run and very informative, and so thank you for that. Secondly, I have been in discussions with the League of Women Voters about the potential of holding another informational forum in the city regarding information about the third rail. I think there's a lot of information out there, and I think it would be helpful to some of the, I know Glenview is doing this forum, but I think that some of the issues are exclusive to Lake Forest with regard to this, and so I think it still would be productive to have our own forum on that regard. I think that the Glenview forum will be very helpful, but it looks like it's primarily a panel of people who are our representatives in government, which is very helpful. I'm thinking that we would do it with the league forum and format and have a question and answer period and potentially some people from WIS.I, Amtrak, Metra to answer those questions. So we're all working from a common set of facts. And so thank you to the league for being willing to work on this, and hopefully we can work a little more on our end on it. So that's my comment. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Alderman Bushman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also had the pleasure of attending the Action Committee forum, and they also touched on safety issues, and they also touched on various ways in which some of them are not being implemented as they had originally perceived them to be. And without going into any detail, I know the action group has, slides and presentation that maybe it would be appropriate to have that further dialogue on issues of the railroad safety issue, because it is important to us, no question about it. In terms of the Glenview meeting, I know I intend to attend that. I think they've been very active, proactive in trying to do things in this area, which to me is consistent with what I tried to express at the last meeting, that rather than us view this thing as something that we do nothing until the EA is final, again, I encourage us to be vigilant, look at all opportunities we can to see what we can do to prevent that third rail from ever appearing here in the city of Lake Forest. And it looks like, the city or the village of Glenview is following that approach. I've never had a chance to meet any of the folks, never had a chance to discuss with them their approach, their philosophy, their plans. But I wanted to share with the council that my intention is to reach out to Glenview and to sit down, whether it's a village trustee or someone else that's willing to meet with me, to get a better understanding how they view the process. And who knows, maybe we can learn something. We may find some synergies there too, which I think is important going forward. So, and hopefully no one has a problem with that. And also, if any other alderman wants to join me, if a meeting like that can be arranged, again, I'd have no problem with that too.
Thank you.
Mayor Lansing, I know Alderman Reisenberg is going to be a while, and if I could just pile on for a second. I laud your efforts, Alderman Bushman, and I think getting together with the league would be great. This sounds Lake Forest centric, I know, but it feels to me, particularly the environmental concerns that we have here, are pretty unique in terms of the proposed location of the third rail. And I guess I feel like that we can talk among I'm delighted for people to go to Glenview, but that we can talk among ourselves, and I think there's a lot of benefit to doing that. So I'm hoping those conversations about doing something with the league, who is very experienced at moderating things and probably do a great job. Okay, that's it, sorry, because I know we have other important stuff.
Mayor, I'd like to just second Alderman Rummel's suggestion on the League of Women Rights. It's a great forum for that kind of thing.
Thank you.
Alderman Reisenberg is recognized.
Okay, this is gonna take a little bit.
Okay.
Last month, City Council retained Ms. Lee Jeter to conduct a neutral, independent investigation of the city's lobbying expenditures for the pedestrian underpass and Amtrak.
Can't hear you.
Oh, that's because I don't have my microphone on. Thank you. I'll start over again. Yes, this should help. Last month, City Council retained Ms. Lee Jeter to conduct a neutral, independent investigation of the city's lobbying expenditures for the pedestrian underpass and Amtrak stop at the Everett Telegraph Road Station. Ms. Jeter was selected to perform this investigation due to her experience representing both public and private sector employees in labor and employment matters, as well as her extensive experience conducting independent investigations. In preparation of this report, Ms. Jeter collected and reviewed all relevant data, as well as interviewed city staff members, elected officials, and others possessing pertinent information. Tonight, Ms. Jeter will present the findings, conclusions, and recommendations of her investigation. Lee?
Good evening. Can everyone hear me? This is the investigation report regarding city expenditures to a lobbying firm in connection with the acquisition of an Amtrak stop and pedestrian underpass. In late December 2017, City Council Alderman Jack Reisenberg contacted me to conduct a neutral, independent investigation into information that the City Council had learned about an agreement between the City of Lake Forest and the lobbying firm Chambers, Conlin, and Hartwell. This report details my findings, conclusions, and recommendations regarding the investigation. Just to give you an overview of the investigation, on November 30th of 2017, members of the Citizens for Action Group sent an email to City Council members alleging that the city had, quote, funneled hundreds of thousands of dollars through the Filippini law firm to pay a DC registered lobbyist to lobby for an Amtrak stop, end quote, in Lake Forest. The email indicated that through this arrangement, the city had paid the lobbying firm CCH approximately $200,000. The email further indicated that the City Council, quote, may be unaware of this expenditure of taxpayer dollars because it is likely disguised as a legal expenditure to its attorney, end quote. The City Council conducted a preliminary investigation into these matters. Based on the nature of the allegations, Alderman Reisenberg contacted me on behalf of the city in late December 2017 and asked me to conduct a neutral, independent investigation into these allegations. In connection with the investigation, the City Council requested that I interview relevant parties of interest, review any relevant documents, and prepare a report that sets forth my overall investigation findings, conclusions, and recommendations. Significantly, throughout the investigation, I was given the opportunity to review all relevant documents and interview all relevant witnesses. No one from the city council, or otherwise limited my investigation or otherwise provided me any directives regarding my investigation or my findings. To be clear, no one influenced this report's findings, conclusions, or recommendations. During the investigation, I interviewed relevant witnesses and parties of interest, including various city staff, the city attorney, current and former elected officials, and members of the action group. During the investigation, I also reviewed extensive documents and emails. One question that did arise during the investigation was the scope of what the City Council wanted me to investigate. In particular, the action group shared with me a number of concerns that they had beyond the extent of the lobbying expenditures and payments to CCH. I shared those concerns with City Council. The City Council determined that the scope of my investigation should be limited to its initial question, namely the lobbying expenditures and payments to CCH. Thus, this report addresses those questions only. To give you some background regarding the city's structure and governance, the city is an Illinois home rule municipality located in Lake County. Under the city charter, city code, and/or Illinois municipal code, the structure and governance of the city is set forth as follows. The city council is comprised of the mayor and 8 aldermen. The City Council is a legislative body that establishes but does not implement policies of the city. The mayor is a member of and presiding officer of the City Council, as well as the chief executive officer of the city. As chief executive officer, the mayor is responsible for overseeing the implementation of the policies established by the City Council and shall take care that the laws and ordinances are faithfully executed. When a policy is articulated without specifying the means of implementation, the mayor has the authority to exercise discretion in implementing such policy. The city manager is the chief administrative officer and is charged with assisting the mayor in implementing the laws and policies of the city. The city attorney is an administrative officer of the city appointed by vote of City Council. The city attorney's client is the city itself. To give you some background about the applicable ordinances, pursuant to Code Section 38.31, the city manager or his or her designee shall have the power to make all purchases involving a total expenditure of less than $20,000. All other purchases shall require the approval of the City Council. Relatedly, Code Section 38.37A provides that contracts with vendors or other providers delivering services on an unspecified but ongoing basis and annual amounts anticipated to be more than $20,000 shall be presented to the City Council for consideration as part of the review and approval of the city's annual budget. City Code Section 40.01 provides that it is essential to the proper operation of democratic government that public officials be independent and impartial, that governmental decisions and policy be made through proper channels, and in accordance with the Illinois Open Meetings Act and other statutes and laws governing conduct by public officials and public office not be used for private gain, and that there be public confidence in the integrity of government. Some city policies regarding the West Track Station and Amtrak. For many years, the City Council has supported building a pedestrian underpass and securing an Amtrak stop at the West Station. In fact, such policy considerations are included in the city's budget for every year since at least 2014. Documents show that the city formally began pursuing the Amtrak stop for Lake Forest as early as 2002. In 2012, the city, Metra, Amtrak, Illinois Department of Transportation, Wisconsin Department of Transportation, and the Canadian Pacific Railroad signed a memorandum of understanding to investigate the feasibility of creating an Amtrak stop in Lake Forest. Subsequently, the City Council adopted a resolution in July 2012 referencing the Memorandum of Understanding and supporting the pursuit of an Amtrak stop at the West Station. I'd like to now give you some background regarding the retention of CCH. The regulation of railroads is very complex and largely governed by federal law. As such, it is not unusual for entities to employ lobbyists and/or consultants to assist with navigating the complex regulations, grant possibilities, and other issues that arise in this area. The city's initial lobbying efforts to gain grant funding for the Amtrak stop and/or pedestrian underpass began in the 2012 to 2014 time period, and possibly earlier. At that time, the city's attorney, Victor Filippini, was employed by the law firm Holland & Knight. Holland & Knight offered lobbying services through its Washington, D.C. offices. To obtain lobbying assistance, the city thus retained Holland & Knight attorney Robert Bradner to secure federal funding and support for the West Station issues. As one would expect, as Mr. Bradner was an attorney with Holland & Knight, bills for these services were included in the city's legal bills from Holland & Knight. In June 2014, Mr. Filippini left Holland & Knight, and the city no longer relied on Holland & Knight's lobbying services. As the city began to find someone new to assist the city in its efforts, City Manager Bob Kiley learned about the CCH firm, which specializes in transportation issues. Although Mr. Kiley knew that CCH also happened to work for Metra, Mr. Kiley and then Mayor Don Schoenheider did not perceive a conflict, as Metra was a necessary partner in getting the pedestrian underpass and Amtrak stop. On or about November 20th, 2015, Mr. Kiley reached out to Jason Ty, the president of CCH, regarding the possibility of retaining CCH for two defined purposes. One, assist with getting an Amtrak Hiawatha service stop in Lake Forest, and two, assist with getting funding related to the construction of a pedestrian underpass associated with the proposed Amtrak stop. I did not obtain any evidence in the course of the investigation to suggest that the scope of the lobbying efforts ever expanded beyond these stated goals. In an email on December 2nd, 2015, Mr. Ty proposed the basic terms of a contract with the city for CCH's services, which included the following relevant terms: a 12-month term with a 30-day out clause exercisable by either party. A proposed retainer would be $9,500 per month plus expenses, and the scope of work was identified as follows. 1, advocate state and federal officials and other public and private stakeholders as necessary on behalf of an Amtrak Hiawatha service stop in Lake Forest, and 2, advocate state federal officials for capital funding related to the construction of a pedestrian underpass associated with the proposed Amtrak stop. Mr. Kiley shared this email with Mayor Schoenheider. Indeed, although Mayor Schoenheider stated that he does not recall ever seeing the financial terms of the contract, he is copied on emails where Mr. Ty's proposed terms, including the financial terms, are included. In addition, it is worth noting that Mayor Schoenheider was present in a face-to-face meeting with Mr. Kiley and CCH prior to any contract being signed, as well as in meetings after the contract was signed. During executive session with City Council on January 19th, 2016, Mr. Kiley updated City Council about various issues related to the West Train Station. During that discussion, he advised City Council that he and Mayor Schoenheider had been talking with a lobbyist about getting assistance for obtaining federal money for the pedestrian underpass and securing an Amtrak stop. Mr. Kiley noted that they had been talking specifically to Mr. Ty and explained that they had been speaking with him because Metra had used him as a lobbyist and he was very effective in these areas. Mr. Kiley further noted to City Council that the city needed to obtain lobbying assistance to reach its two goals. Mayor Schoenheider subsequently remarked that the primary focus of the lobbyists would be to secure the funds necessary to build the pedestrian underpass. Neither Mr. Kiley nor Mayor Schoenheider mentioned the proposed cost of the lobbying contract. As relevant here, those present at this executive session included former Finance Chairman and Alderman George Pandeleon, Alderman Prue Beidler, Alderman Randy Tack, Alderman Timothy Newman, Alderman Michelle Marino, and Alderman Jack Reisenberg. During this discussion, Alderman Beidler asked a general question about the issues related to the West Train Station. However, none of the aldermen asked any questions about the lobbying efforts or the cost of any such efforts. In December or January 2016, Mr. Kiley reached out to Mr. Filippini and advised him about the city's interest in engaging CCH for lobbying services. Ultimately, Mr. Kiley proposed having the CCH bills go through Mr. Filippini's firm to protect confidentiality, to avoid an unfair advantage with competitors, and because that is the way the city had handled its earlier lobbying efforts through Holland and Knight. Documents show that Mr. Kiley advised Mayor Schoenheider that the CCH bills would be included with the legal bills from Mr. Filippini's firm. The initial consulting agreement between the city and CCH was finalized in a contract dated February 4th, 2016. Mr. Filippini signed the contract in his capacity as the city attorney. In February 2017, CCH sent an updated engagement letter to Mr. Filippini regarding renewal of the consulting agreement. Mr. Kiley authorized Mr. Filippini to renew the contract. Documents show that Mr. Kiley advised Mayor Schoenheider that he was providing Mr. Filippini with this authority. Mayor Schoenheider stated that he does not recall this exchange. On February 8th, 2017, Mr. Filippini signed the second contract with CCH in his capacity as city attorney. During the course of CCH's work for the city, CCH made required public reports regarding its lobbying efforts on behalf of the city. Those reports identified the client as Filippini Law Firm, LLP, on behalf of the city of Lake Forest. In other words, its work for the city of Lake Forest was publicly identified. I'd like to now move to some background regarding the payments to CCH. As City Council is aware, approval was not sought from or given by the City Council for the potential and/or actual cost of these two contracts. When asked why that was not done, Mr. Kiley stated that when the initial contract was signed, they were not sure how long the engagement with CCH would last, 2 months, 6 months, or longer. Mr. Kiley claimed that once the contract began, he focused on the strategy involved with reaching the city's goals and did not think about the administrative details. He also explained that he felt that the City Council was engaged insofar as Mayor Schoenheider and later Mayor Rob Lansing were involved with phone calls and meetings with CCH and aware of what was going on with the lobbyist. Mr. Kiley acknowledged that it was an error on his part not to seek City Council approval for the CCH expenditures. Mayor Schoenheider stated that he never knew the amount of the lobbyist expenditures and assumed that it was within the $20,000 authority that Mr. Kiley possessed. He explained that he regrets not seeing the emails that he's copied on where the amounts are included. Mayor Lansing acknowledged that after he became mayor, he asked Mr. Kiley how much the lobbyist cost. When Mr. Kiley told him that it was $9,500 per month, Mayor Lansing assumed that City Council had previously approved the payment and did not think much about it. Mayor Lansing noted that he thought the cost was reasonable in light of the lobbying efforts. A question that arises is why were the CCH bills included in Mr. Filippini's law firm's legal bills? Mr. Kiley explained that the city wanted the relationship with CCH to remain as confidential as possible because the city was concerned that other entities were vying for the same Amtrak stop and grant money. The city did not want other entities to know about the nature of the lobbying activities and somehow gain an unfair advantage in this regard. Mr. Kiley denied trying to keep the information confidential from City Council and pointed to the fact that he was sharing information with Mayor Schoenheider, Mayor Lansing, and at least in some respects, other council members. Mr. Kiley also noted that the city had previously paid for the city's lobbying efforts through the legal bills, so he did not view that as unusual. Mr. Filippini explained that having the CCH bills paid by his law firm was not unusual, nor was it designed as a cover-up. In support of this conclusion, Mr. Filippini noted the following. First, Filippini Law Firm LLP's engagement letter with the city specifically provides that the law firm is authorized to hire third parties in furtherance of the city's legal interests. There is no limitation in the engagement letter on what type of consultants can be used or the amounts that may be paid to them. Mr. Filippini noted that this is a common practice among attorneys and their clients. Next, Holland & Knight and Filippini Law Firm LLP have retained numerous third-party providers on behalf of the city, some in the ordinary course of litigation and administrative hearing, for example, court reporters, some in the ordinary course of litigation, others at the firm's recommendation, for example, expert witnesses, and others at the city's request, for example, real estate consultants and lobbyists. In each of these instances, the contract with the third-party provider was between Mr. Filippini's law firm on behalf of the city and the third party. Next, Mr. Filippini stated that the Finance Committee Chairman reviews the monthly check register and grants the approval of all bills paid, including legal bills. As such, the law firm's legal bills have been subject to review by the designated city council member. Next, each legal invoice from Filippini Law Firm LLP has been approved by action of the City Council. As such, Mr. Filippini did not think that the CCH contract needed to be specifically approved by the City Council because City Council approved his law firm's legal bills, which included the CCH invoice. Mr. Filippini assumed that City Council was aware of the arrangement via approving his law firm's legal bills. He explained that he did not know that City Council was not aware of it. Mr. Filippini assumed prior to recent events in December 2017 that the Finance Committee Chair was reviewing his law firm's detailed legal bills, not just the summary check register. He noted that in many communities, his law firm's legal bills are part of the City Council's packet. Next, Mr. Filippini noted that the detailed information regarding his law firm's legal bills, including the CCH payments, was available to City Council and the Finance Committee Chair. Next, in his cover letter to Mr. Kiley each month with his law firm's legal bills, Mr. Filippini specifically mentioned that he is attaching, quote, the invoice from CCH relating to the lobbying services that are billed under city manager / miscellaneous, end quote. The actual invoice from CCH is attached to his bill. Finance Director Elizabeth Holub and Communications Director Susan Banks are copied on this cover letter and attached bills. Next, Mr. Filippini explained that in this instance, there was a desire to maintain confidentiality / attorney-client privilege over certain matters because of the competitive nature of the situation and wanting to keep the city's efforts as close to the vest as possible. He noted that there was a desire to maintain attorney-client privilege if key information came in, particularly about grant conditions. Next, Mr. Filippini noted that the city's finances were audited and there was nothing identified as unusual in any audit regarding his legal bills. Finally, Mr. Filippini stated that the payments to CCH over $20,000 do not violate the city's code provisions because of the facts outlined above. Next, I'm going to talk about the use of the general fund contingency account. The city provides 2 general fund contingency accounts which were established to enable the finance staff to record and track an expense that may exceed a line item budget or may be an unbudgeted item. Such expenses occur on a regular basis, and the contingency account serves as a place to record the items so they do not get charged in an undisciplined manner to other accounts. In preparing for the fiscal year 2017 budget, Mr. Kiley asked Finance Director Elizabeth Holub to add $108,000 in the budget for the general fund contingency account for a lobbying contract under discussion. Ms. Holub did not question Mr. Kiley about this request. Apparently, no one on the City Council noticed this increase in the budget for the contingency account. The CCH expenses initially were charged to the city's legal accounts. However, once the fiscal year 2017 budget was put in place, expenditures for CCH were transferred to come from the general fund contingency account where it had been budgeted. That process was continued when preparing for fiscal year 2018 budget. Now I'm going to give you the analysis, findings, and recommendations based on those facts. First, with respect to City Manager Bob Kiley. I find that Mr. Kiley violated City Code Sections 38.31, 38.27A, and 40.01 when he allowed the city to engage in 2 contracts with CCH without obtaining the required approval from City Council. Collectively, the 2 contracts with CCH and the work that CCH has done under the contracts exceed $200,000, well above the $20,000 in purchasing authority that Mr. Kiley possesses. Although Mr. Kiley asserted that he was not aware of the probable extent of the CCH engagement when it started, at a minimum, he should have sought City Council approval once it became apparent that the CCH engagement was going to extend more than 2 months. In other words, that it became apparent that it was going to be more than $20,000. Given that the initial contract lasted the full 12 months, it was even more incumbent on Mr. Kiley to seek City Council approval before authorizing a second contract with CCH containing the same terms. Notably, Mr. Kiley agrees that this was a mistake on his part and agrees that the CCH contracts should have been approved by City Council. Significantly, he did not gain any personal advantage or financial benefit as a result of his actions. Therefore, it does not appear that there were further violations of any city ordinance or law. I also find that the use of the general fund contingency account was not a best practice, although not necessarily a specific violation of any city code provision. The general fund contingency account should not be used for anticipated calculated costs that the city expects to have. Rather, the money for the CCH contracts should have been categorized in a different accounting fashion. I do not find that Mr. Kiley's suggestion that the city include the CCH bills with the Filippini law firm LLP's legal billings constituted any per se violation. Indeed, doing so could have been and may have been in the city's best interest to protect confidentiality, ensure attorney-client privilege, and keep the city at a competitive advantage in seeking the Amtrak stop and grant money for the cost of the pedestrian underpass. Nonetheless, City Council should have been made aware of this arrangement, given the month-to-month expenditure of significant funds ultimately exceeding $20,000. I find that Mr. Kiley did not intentionally mislead City Council about the city's use of the lobbyist to implement the goals that City Council had already approved. I believe that Mr. Kiley became wrapped up in the strategy of implementing the City Council's goals and neglected to handle the administrative details. Significantly, in reaching these conclusions, I note that Mr. Kiley included Mayor Schoenheider and Mayor Lansing in telephone calls and meetings with the lobbyist. He informed all of the council members about the intent to retain the lobbyist before signing any contract with CCH, and he included Alderman Marino on certain emails with the lobbyist in at least one meeting. That said, more communication should have been shared with City Council regarding the status of the lobbying efforts as the months went on. While I do not find that Mr. Kiley's actions rise to the level of termination of employment, I recommend that the City Council take appropriate personnel action with respect to Mr. Kiley, consistent with its practices and procedures. Next, with respect to Mayor Don Schoenheider, I find that Mayor Schoenheider also violated City Code Sections 38.31, 38.27A, and 40.01 when he allowed the city to engage in 2 contracts with CCH without obtaining the required approval from City Council. As noted above, the 2 contracts with CCH and the work that CCH has since done under those contracts exceed $200,000, well above the $20,000 in purchasing authority that requires City Council approval. Although Mayor Schoenheider stated that he was not aware that the lobbying costs were to exceed or ever exceeded $20,000, documents established that he either knew or should have known about the amounts in question. As with Mr. Kiley, there is no indication that Mayor Schoenheider gained any personal advantage or financial benefit as a result of these actions, and as such, I do not find any further violations. Mayor Schoenheider also stated that he was not aware that the lobbying expenditures were being paid through Mr. Filippini's law firm. However, documents established that he either knew or should have known about this arrangement. I find that Mayor Schoenheider did not intentionally mislead City Council about the city's use of lobbyists to implement the goals that City Council had already approved. That said, more communication should have been shared with the City Council regarding the status of the lobbying efforts as the months went on. As Mayor Schoenheider is no longer affiliated with the city, I do not have any recommendations for the City Council with respect to him. Next, Mayor Rob Lansing. I find that Mayor Lansing did not violate any city code provisions or other laws. Although Mayor Lansing became aware of the nature and cost of the CCH contract shortly after taking office in May 2017, he stated that he assumed that City Council had previously approved such contracts. Given that the CCH contracts were already in place at that time, his statement is credible. Of course, in hindsight, Mayor Lansing could have asked Mr. Kiley more questions regarding the arrangement with CCH. That said, his failure to do so does not rise to any violation. Mayor Lansing, like the others, did not gain any personal advantage or financial benefit as a result of his actions. I find that Mayor Lansing did not intentionally mislead City Council about the city's use of lobbyists to implement the goals that City Council had already approved, particularly given his relatively short tenure as mayor. That said, more communication should have been shared with City Council regarding the status of the lobbying efforts. I recommend that the City Council take appropriate action to ensure that Mayor Lansing understands the expectations that it has with respect to his open communication with Council. Next, City Attorney Vic Filippini. I find that Mr. Filippini furthered Mr. Kiley and Mayor Schoenheider's ability to violate City Code Sections 38.31, 38.27A, and 40.01, specifically by allowing the city to engage in 2 contracts with CCH without obtaining the required approval from City Council. Again, collectively, those 2 contracts with CCH and the work that CCH has since done under those contracts exceed $200,000, well above the $20,000 in purchasing authority. As with the others, Mr. Filippini did not gain any personal advantage or financial benefit as a result of his actions. Unlike Mr. Kiley, who admits that he should have obtained City Council approval for the CCH contracts, Mr. Filippini provides numerous reasons as to why the arrangement with CCH was proper without City Council approval. Primarily, he claims that because his law firm's engagement letter with the city allows his firm to contract with third parties on behalf of the city in any amount, and the City Council approved all of his law firm's legal bills, specific City Council approval was not necessary for the $20,000 expenditures to CCH. I agree with Mr. Filippini that it is both common and appropriate for attorneys to engage certain third parties on behalf of clients and bill those expenses through the client's legal bills. However, when doing so, it is mostly for purposes of administrative costs, consulting and testifying experts, investigations, court reporters, or litigation or anticipated litigation expenses. In a case such as this one, where a city is retaining the service of a lobbyist on an anticipated year-long basis with month-to-month payments, it is my opinion that it is not so common to bill those expenses through the legal bills. It may be appropriate under limited circumstances to do so for confidentiality or attorney-client privilege reasons, but even assuming that is the case here, I still find that the CCH expenditures should have been approved by City Council. I believe that there exist ways to further both the interest in getting City Council approval as well as protecting the city's interest in confidentiality. Indeed, the fact that the lobbyists were paid out of the general fund contingency account rather than the legal account suggests that this arrangement was not being set up for purely legal reasons. In addition, even if Mr. Filippini is correct and the letter of City Code Sections 38.31, 38.27A, and 40.01 were not violated, I find that the spirit of those code sections was in fact violated. As such, I find that Mr. Filippini should have counseled Mr. Kiley to obtain City Council approval for the CCH contracts when Mr. Filippini became aware of them. I do not find that Mr. Filippini attempted to conceal the nature of his legal bills. To the contrary, Mr. Filippini prominently included in his otherwise short cover letter for his legal bills that he was including the invoice from CCH with his law firm bills and that the invoice related to lobbying services. and he attached the actual invoice from CCH. Mr. Filippini sent the cover letter and attached documents to Mr. Kiley, Ms. Holub, and Ms. Banks. He also was aware that Mayor Schoenheider knew, or at least should have known, that the CCH bills were being paid through his law firm. Moreover, until December 2017, Mr. Filippini assumed that his law firm's detailed legal bills were being reviewed by the Finance Committee Chairman and subsequently being approved by the City Council. Under all of those circumstances, the evidence simply does not support a finding that he or anyone else was trying to cover up the nature of the legal bills or the payments to CCH. I recommend that the City Council take appropriate action to ensure that Mr. Filippini understands its expectations regarding his professional role and obligations as City Attorney. Finally, Finance Director Elizabeth Holub. Finance Director Ms. Holub was aware of the amount of the payments to the lobbyists, the fact that CCH was being paid through Mr. Filippini's firm, and the fact that CCH's expenses were being paid out of the general fund contingency account. Significantly, Ms. Holub did not gain any personal advantage or financial benefit as a result of her knowledge or actions. Ms. Holub explained that she had concerns about how the CCH payments were being made, yet she never questioned Mr. Kiley's direction, nor did she report her concerns to anyone else, such as the City Council's Finance Committee Chairman. She explained that she knew that the city manager, the mayor, and the city attorney were in agreement with the arrangement, so she did not feel that it was her place to question these decisions. Nonetheless, I find that as the city's finance director, Ms. Holub had a responsibility to question these practices, and if no changes were made despite her concerns, reach out to the Finance Committee Chairman for clarification. I recommend that the City Council take appropriate personnel action to ensure that Ms. Holub understands its expectations going forward. Finally, I understand that the City Council and its Finance Committee has taken significant steps to make changes that will strengthen the city's internal controls and compliance. I believe that these measures will result in improved financial processes for the city of Lake Forest. Following tonight's meeting, I will be joining the council in executive session to address any questions you may have regarding my report or to discuss personnel matters that are best left to the executive session. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I have some
Alderman
final
Reisenberg.
comments. Thank you, Lee, for your thorough report. I'd like to note that in all of Ms. Jeter's interactions, she's exhibited extensive legal knowledge, neutrality, integrity, and professionalism. As Ms. Jeter mentioned, she will join us in executive session tonight to answer questions during our discussion and deliberations regarding her recommendations and including also possible personnel actions. After council discusses the final report in executive session, we will make copies of the full report and have them available at City Hall in the morning. Again, on behalf of the council, I'd like to thank the residents who came forward to voice their concerns and present information. In addition to increasing internal controls and improving the city's financial management processes, council now has the benefit of Ms. Jeter's recommendations to use as a roadmap as we move forward. As we conclude this review, the city must ensure open communication and rebuild any trust that may have been lost in the process. Now we must move forward. It is time to collectively focus our attention on other important community matters that have taken a back seat to this inquiry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alderman Reisenberg, and the rest of the council for the enormous amount of time and effort put into this. We will be going into executive session at the end of the regular city council agenda. The next item on the agenda is the
Mr. Mayor, do have one little somewhat housekeeping item to cover on the minutes, if I may. In the January 16th council meeting,
Alderman, yeah, in the omnibus.
no, this was going to be handled as under the councilman's comments.
Yeah, he needs to bring because this was approved at a previous city council meeting, so he has to bring it up to reconsider now,
Oh,
sorry.
okay, I'm sorry, okay. Good idea.
At the January 16th council meeting, 14 individuals provided comments to the council within the 3-minute time limitation. But it was pointed out to me that the minutes of the meeting did not reflect at all any substance or topic that these individuals commented on. So I proposed to add very briefly what topic they commented on, and would ask, I'd like to make a motion to reconsider approval of the January 16th minutes, which were approved. So this requires a motion to reconsider approval of the minutes that were approved at the February 5th meeting. And this motion requires a second if we're going to go forward.
Second.
Before we vote on that, can I just ask what the standard practice with that is? I mean, we have many meetings where citizens make commentary, and I be honest, I don't recall whether we provide summaries of citizen comments. And when we do, how do we decide how to summarize them such that the summary actually reflects what was said?
I would like, is this kind of a process issue with me? I mean, should we be going back and, say, revisiting or do revisionist changes or embellish? Vic, what's your opinion on this, quite frankly?
Well, the council has the ability at any time to revisit any of its actions. It would include the approval of minutes. The motion that Alderman Bushman offers is something that would not present an opportunity for action tonight. It would merely set it up for your agenda at the next meeting. It's not on the agenda for any kind of final action, but this would set the stage. Addressing Alderman Tack's question, I understand that the city's standard practice has not been to offer these types of summaries, but they're your minutes. You can do with them as you wish. Certainly when we are in a public hearing context, which is more common for, say, the Zoning Board of Appeals or the BRB or the Plan Commission, the public hearing would warrant a more fulsome set of minutes that would describe the nature of the comments, and you see that from time to time when you get packet materials from recommendations of those bodies. The minutes here, however, are really minutes of your actions, and as a customary matter, it's not something that I believe the city has generally done. That said, as I mentioned before, they're your minutes. You can do with them as you wish, and if they are of benefit to you to have some kind of historical marker of what may or may not have been said, that is up to you all.
Right. So that being said, I would be uncomfortable changing policy for this specific purpose. I see no point in it. There was nothing exceptional said. I mean, many of the things that were said at previous meetings. It's commentary to us. It's no more important than any other citizen commentary that we've received in the past 5.5 years that I've been here. Furthermore, I think it's sort of strange that an alderman would summarize the commentary and ask that we approve his summary of the commentary. So I would oppose this on principle and as a matter of this is a distinct deviation from practice.
I don't think I heard where we have a policy that we do not describe at all the topic that was discussed.
Well,
by
there's
the
an
individuals.
established practice. You just
And I've
heard
gone
it,
through
and
some
that's my
minutes that have
understanding.
I've gone through some minutes where we do say the person had comments on the following subject.
Okay.
Alderman Bushman, have we seen your proposed changes of those minutes?
Yes, it was sent out today.
It came out today. Okay, I was trying to track that down. Did that go over, was that, Bob, that was over your,
It was yesterday.
and okay. Okay, I have to be honest with you, I have no problem with this. As a person who fairly routinely, I believe Ms. Boyer will affirm this, modifies minutes, or at least tries to. I think if this is helpful, I also think that there are certain circumstances where there is a particularly complicated discussion that's been going on. It's helpful to me to have the record in the minutes. I also take copious notes, which I hopefully can read from time to time and sometimes can't. But I think having a formal record which reflects the comments of the meeting does us no harm. And if it does us some good, I would absolutely affirm that this is fine. I'm just sorry I can't actually find the language in my email, but I'll track it
Without speaking for the citizens, I think they do appreciate their recognition of the topic. And again, what I've put together, it's 6, 7, 8 words. It doesn't go into any detail. It doesn't try and be controversial. It just tries to identify the topic that was addressed.
Well, actually, and I seconded your motion, I haven't been on this council that long, but, so I don't know what the past practices have been, but for me, it's very helpful when I'm reviewing minutes from the prior meeting to understand and recall what was said by residents in that prior meeting, because I find their comments very helpful and meaningful to me. And so whatever your past practices have been, I would propose that we change them, and going forward, that we do make a record of who spoke, when, and the general topic that they addressed. It would be very helpful to me.
Sure. Well, perhaps if you want to hear what they had to say, you could pull up the video of the meeting and you can hear everything they had to say in the context, the demeanor in which they said it. This does none of the above. If somebody really wants to know what was said and in the way it was said and what the purpose of it being said was, you need to see it in context. And your summary of this does nobody any good. When I read that, I will tell you, I wouldn't have understood what those people were saying. It was not helpful, and it's a change in policy and practice, and I see no point to it in this particular case beyond any other case. And in 5.5 years, nobody's ever made a point of this except for this one issue, which happens to be an issue you care tremendously about, as everybody does from different perspectives. But I just see no reason to change policy for this one circumstance.
I also have the problem with this is what I'm about to say is going to sound like I'm taking a shot at Joanne and the other people from Action. I'm not. But the fact is the minutes are the minutes. What I did read, Prue, and it actually came out in an email from Biddy.
Yeah, I got it. I found it.
Several days ago. I did read it.
I think yesterday.
And quite frankly, what was in Ray's revisionist thing would not have been said at the meeting. So it is, to me, it was an embellishment of that, okay? I don't think that we should continue to do this. Randy's right. I've been on here for 5.5 years. I've never seen this done before. I have no reason why it needs to be done. We need to put things in the minutes for things that were not said. Now, if somebody wants to pull up that tape, I'll listen to it. But what Ray put in there was not said at that meeting.
I think these were the subjects. I think what
Yes,
he's
the topics.
included are the subject lines of each
Example,
comment. I was not at the last meeting, but I was at this meeting, and this is what happened. And to be honest with you, I think it's helpful. I don't see the harm done, and I'm not aware that we have any policy that says we can't revise the minutes, because we do.
And in fact, isn't that what minutes are?
Okay,
I mean,
Minutes
comments-
aren't transcripts,
Our
though. If
comments
you
are
want a
summarized.
transcript, then watch the video.
Subject. It's the subject line. It's not quotations, it's a subject line.
But even the subject line is inaccurate, and that's my point, is
I don't-
that when one person gets to take 3 minutes and boils it down to 6 words and embellishes it, it doesn't give you the flavor of what was said, the meaning of what was said, the context of what was said. There was public commentary on general issues. that we were talking about. That's fine and dandy. If you want to find out about it, if you want to know more about it, if I was saying something in a meeting and I wanted somebody to have a better understanding of what I'd said, I would appreciate it if they went and listened to what I said and how I said it, okay? So, for instance, when there's a summary of what I'm saying right now, I can assure you it isn't going to be what I said right now. And I can assure you that if somebody who disagrees with me summarized what I said right now, it really wouldn't be representative of what I said right now. And I can tell you that that summary did not represent what was said, how it was said, the context in which it was said, and it's unnecessary and not helpful. It isn't a big deal, really. Frankly, I don't care, except that I see no point to inserting this for this specific reason in making a habit of this, unless we're going to have a transcript, in which case we better get a court reporter in here to start recording every word that everybody says.
Okay, and I'm gonna say my final comment, and I'm gonna get it off my chest. And I'll vote for this thing, because I just wanna, we got too much else to do tonight. Okay, minutes are what was said, not what people wanted to say, not what they wish they would have said. It was what they said. They are referred to, they are referred back to in court hearings, and we should not be adding things into minutes that were not said. If you want to find out what's said, these things are not transcribed. They are recorded. Okay? I do not want to have to get into these kind of discussions week meeting in and meeting out where we've got to do revisionist changes and embellishments to the minutes to satisfy some particular topic that an individual embraces. Okay? I know I offended a lot of people out here. You know something? I don't care. I don't care. The minutes are the minutes.
So,
Listen, I think
Okay,
we've,
let's move on with this. I don't
hold on,
wanna hear this.
hold on. All right, the views have been expressed. As a point of order, an alderman has made a motion to amend minutes. And also, I think it's a separate matter, propose for council to have a different policy going forward. This is a motion to place it on the agenda at the next meeting?
There would need to be a motion, or I'm sorry, there is a motion. There would need to be a favorable vote, which would allow the reconsideration, and then you'd be able to see what is being proposed and vote on whether you want those changes incorporated. And at that time, you can either approve the minutes as they were approved originally, approve the minutes with the modifications suggested, or even approve it with some other set of modifications. But tonight is just to put it back on your agenda for the next regular meeting.
Okay, as a matter of due process.
Right.
Robert's
So you
agenda
should,
item.
I would suggest that we have a roll call on this so that we can have it plainly established in the record what the vote was on the motion to
Right.
reconsider.
Good idea. So,
So can I ask a question before we move forward? So who generates the minutes as we receive them currently?
City clerk is the statutorily responsible person.
Okay, so can I suggest that if you're going to propose this, that then if we're going to summarize citizen comments going forward, that the city clerk be the one who summarized them, not individuals on the council with particular perspectives as to what was said? Because this should be as objective a reflection of what was said as it can possibly be. And I would argue that that's the role of the clerk, not of the alderman from the 2nd Ward or the 3rd Ward or the 4th Ward.
Alderman Tack, I'd welcome our clerk's any comments she may have and clarification, and also any suggestions you have that you feel that anything is misleading or really was not discussed.
Well, again, I don't want to get in future arguments about what citizens said about things, you know, because what they said is on video. We can see it. We can go back and look and see what they said. We can reconsider it. We look at videos of meetings all the time. Stuff comes before us from Building Review Board and the Plan Commission, and we go back and watch hours of meetings because we want to see what was actually said. We want to see it in context. You know, I don't like condensations of what people said if I'm really concerned about what it is, the substance of what they said. I want to see what they said, I want to see how they said it, and what you're proposing to do accomplishes none of those things and doesn't allow intelligent decision-making going forward. Further, it subjects us to this idea of every time we have to review minutes saying, well, that's not really what that person said. Oh, yes, it is that. I heard this, I heard that. We shouldn't be getting into that. We're here listening to them, getting the sense of what they're saying, listening to it, and digesting it. If we need to go back and digest it again, we have the opportunity. On video, it's on sound, it's what they said. It's not our summary of what they said. It's not your perception or my perception of what they said. I think this is a bad idea. It's just, I think it's inappropriate.
But we're only voting.
Mr. Mayor, can I call the question?
I'd like that one. Ray, were you at that meeting?
No, I was not.
I'd like to call the question.
Now we have to vote
I
on
would
that,
like to
right?
call the question too. I would only say, since several personal reflections have been made here, I've been on a couple of boards where there was a lot of revisionist discussion that consumed a lot of good meeting time, going back over minutes because everybody wanted to make sure that everything was said just the right way, which begs the question, gee whiz, we are recording these. And I think that's the only true and proper record if someone wants to really track what was said. So I suppose a less than one line topic description is something to consider. But we are, at this moment, only going to take a vote as to whether this will be an agenda item at the next meeting. We have a proposal, we have a second, and this, Alderman Marino.
Excuse me, question. Ray, what am I missing? Why would you propose this unusual path?
I'm not sure, unusual, but I proposed the path because we have some citizens that had some feedback on the minutes, the fact that they spent the time coming to the council meeting, waiting over an hour to have the opportunity of giving comments, coming to the podium, being limited to 3 minutes, and then the minutes did not give any clue as to what they said, what their topic was, and then the mayor had the opportunity of providing his comments, and his comments were recorded verbatim. Couldn't be any more detailed to that. And so I'm trying to work with the citizens to make them feel that we're hearing them, we're listening to them, and we really do want to work with them. And I think this is a positive step in that effort, and that's why.
Thank you. Do you think that everyone is aware that videos can be watched and are the preferred path?
I don't know if everyone's aware of it, but I also realize, and I'll speak for myself, sometimes it's much easier to refer to minutes to see where that topic was discussed and, to get some general idea what was discussed about it. To go back to the video and to spend working through 3 hours of video where it is on there to listen to it is not, I don't find it all that easy, but yeah, if you have to do it, you have to do it. Minutes, come back to the purpose of minutes. Minutes are intended to summarize, not be verbatim, but to summarize what was discussed. And if the citizens make a point there, we should acknowledge in our minutes what, topic they were at least addressing. These are not controversial proposals, and I'm willing for, listen to any modification to my very brief description. But, I think it's something we owe the citizens. That's my purpose.
But tonight, we're just voting on whether to discuss this again.
Right.
Which
That's
is,
why I called
to
the
Randy's
question.
point, a little concerning. And I will say, I'm very concerned about the impact this does have on a city clerk who is keeping track of a lot of stuff. I have a proposal, which I realize would have to be discussed again should we vote in favor of having this come up at the March 19th meeting. I would propose that on the form that people submit, they give you a 6-line descriptor. And that's it. They say what it is. So you don't have to do it, Biddy. It would be somebody's, and that we would formally, going forward, have the subject line that they give us, that's the 6 words, assuming they're suitable for print. And then then we get their sense. Now, whether they actually, you know what it's like in an email where the subject line sometimes doesn't match what somebody says, but at least that's what they think they're talking about, and that's what we think when we send an email with a subject line we think we're talking about. I'm just using that as proposing that as an idea, because I have to say, if I had Ms. Boyer's job and I had to do this, I would find it tough, and I think Randy is also right. I don't think it's up to us to comment on what people were saying in their comments. So I think this is a bit of a conundrum. I don't see it as a violation of policy. I'm just wondering how hard it's going to be to execute, and it feels like we could simplify it by having people tell us what they're going to say, but say it very briefly. That's a suggestion. Should we vote in favor of this, then that would come up, I guess, on the 19th when we have to talk about it again. Right?
That's a reasonable thought, particularly when it's all fully recorded and every word of it is out there. So, that said,
Do we have to vote on calling the question?
you might have a
Yeah, so we got a bunch of
restatement
votes
of
here.
the motion, Alderman Bushman. A
The
restatement.
motion is to reconsider approval of the January 16, 2018 City Council meeting minutes that were approved at the February 5th, 2018 City Council meeting, to include language that, and I've listed them, I can read them into the record, but I think for time purposes, I think everyone would prefer not doing that, but where I have a brief description of anywhere from 6 to 10 words for each item, what topic they were commenting on.
Okay.
That's what I propose.
And there's a second?
I did, yes.
Okay. Will the clerk please call the roll on the question?
Alderman Beidler.
Aye.
Alderman Morris. Alderman Rummel.
Aye.
Alderman Tack. Alderman Reisenberg.
Nay.
Alderman Moreno.
Nay.
Alderman Bushman.
Aye.
Four yea, 3 nay, motion carries.
Now, Prue, will you make your motion?
No, it wasn't a motion. That's going to have to be, we just agreed we're going to talk about this in March. It's done. It's done for now. I think that's what the
Yeah,
motion.
this is not on tonight's agenda, so
Yeah,
you
no, it's
can't
not
be
on-
taking
And
any
what
action.
we're also going to talk about is what you
Or we
proposed?
could just shoot down the whole idea in March. I mean, we're going to have to talk about it again, but we
Okay.
could maybe be
General
thinking
topic.
about it and
All
sort
right,
it
I'll
out.
change my vote to yay. Yes.
Done.
And,
Let's go. Well, because I agree with what Prue said.
all right, guys, let's get back to
Thank you, Jack. I appreciate that.
civil order here.
The motion actually then, if Alderman Reisenberg is changing his vote, then the motion passes 5-2.
Amen.
Okay.
5-2 or 5-1? Who cares? Oh, 5-2.
We have to trust the city clerk.
All right.
Great job.
Next item on the agenda is the opportunity for citizens to address the city council on non-agenda items. And I think we have some. Thank you. Let's see, how many do we have? A whole number of them here. First, Linda Remensnyder, 251 King Muir Road, Lake Forest.
Hi, I'd like to address you from a personal perspective as well as a professional perspective. I had sort of followed this in the newspaper, this issue about the third rail, and I decided, despite the snow and the jeopardy in getting over to Gorton, I was there in the audience with my husband. And I've always felt protected by the city of Lake Forest. I've always felt safe here, and I just want you to know that I was shaken. I drive my grandchild every day to Everett, and my daughter went there, and I could see as they laid out all the schools that are in the path, Everett to St. Mary's to East Lake Academy to Lake Forest Academy to Montessori, and I've been here since 1980. I'm very familiar with all of them. I've been there, and you know that our kids are our most precious asset. And to have them in that line leads me to wonder, because my husband and I live in a Lake Forest landmark, and I want you to know that you, as a committee, as well as Lake Forest Preservation, made us jump through holes every time we put on an addition. or hoops, I guess is the right word. And I like that. I want you to take care of us that way. I felt like you didn't take care of us with this, and you weren't transparent about it. And it was poor, it was very well attended in that the whole room was filled, but I want you to know if the weather had been better or if the topic had gotten out better, there's a lot of petitions occurring unrelated to this group. Secondly, from a professional perspective, I am a doctor of audiology. I think you need to know that there's a local person. His name is Tom Thunder. He's a doctor of audiology. In addition, he has a master's in physics of sound, and he goes internationally all over, and he's going to look at, if you contact with him, the impact of the noise level and the impact of the vibration, especially on old equipment, that there's a lot of promises is going to be improved. And I don't believe those promises. I don't want any of this, and I want you to know I don't like what happened. So thank you.
Next, Amy Francetic, 1322 Deer Path.
I was here at that meeting, and I want to thank Alderman Bushman and Alderman Beidler for acknowledging that many of us who took the time to come here, prepare remarks, and speak felt like at the end of that it was sort of erased, even if there is a video representation of it. So thank you for raising that concern and just wanting to record that we all did take the time, and we did have remarks that were very much in opposition to the third rail. So thank you for hearing us and representing us. I'm speaking again today to voice my concern in opposition to the third rail in West Lake Forest. I live in Ward 3 in the Meadowood neighborhood, and my family regularly walks, bikes, and runs in the Middle Fork Savannah. I'm also an executive in the energy industry and have served on Mayor Rahm Emanuel's and Governor Bruce Rauner's energy transition committees. Part of the reason that my family likes living in West Lake Forest is the access to this beautiful open space. As a community, we cannot take the risk of polluting this community treasure with exhaust from the trains that will park and idle on the third rail. Additionally, the freight trains that use this railway carry hazardous material which can explode upon impact and leak into the surrounding protected environment. The improved braking system and GPS systems described by Mayor Lansing will not eliminate this risk. The blast zone for a train carrying fuel is approximately 1 mile. That would include parts of the Academy Woods, Conway Farms, the Meadowood neighborhood, Everett School, all the other schools that the doctor described, and surrounding homes. Increasing the rail traffic is an intolerable risk to the city of Lake Forest. I would like to see the council hold a public hearing on this matter, and I think Alderman Tack and Reisenberg need to participate to hear concerns from the residents that they represent. I do not feel that you have been representing us well. If the third rail proceeds under your watch, you will be leaving a legacy of environmental degradation and pollution for our children. This is unacceptable to me and my family. We need to know more about what the council and the mayor are doing to oppose the third rail. I would hope that you would be willing to spend at least as much time and money to lobby against the third rail as you did to lobby for the Amtrak stop. When we hopefully hold a Lake Forest hearing on the third rail, please come prepared to describe the actions that you will take to prevent the third rail from proceeding. I don't know a single resident that is in favor of this project.
Next, David Rose, 1455 White Oak.
Hi, good evening. This is my fourth council meeting I've been to. I'm a proud resident of the 4th Ward. I came with a whole bunch of prepared statements, but I feel I'm going to go off script because what I just saw transpire really bothered me. There's such condescension towards citizens from this body. If you go back and look at pictures, I don't know if the camera goes back and looks at your faces, but look, the look of disdain. Any assessment of body language would suggest that you don't care about citizens' comments. The mere fact, Mr. Tack, Dr. Tack, that you wanted to go on and on and on and on, that our comments don't matter. We are the citizens you represent. And the fact that you don't want to have a summary, and that's what it is, Mr. Reisenberg, minutes are a summary. They are not the conversations. That's what the video's for. So in a nutshell, I think this highlights the dysfunction of the body. Second of all, I was at the Gorton meeting. It was fantastic. The thing that struck me the most was the fact that people in this community come here for the beauty, the schools, and the safety. And they feel fear to speak up against the very thought of a third rail, because they feel retribution from this body, from the people in the city, from the powers in the city. Why would people not feel comfortable to speak up? Now, some brave souls have come here to speak up, and that's a good thing. I think that we need to really take back our government. Some of you should not come back. When your term comes up, please don't run. I really think that when you have people say, I have heard members of the council say, Citizens for Actions are not credible because there's not new people showing up. Well, there was a lot of people at Gorton, and this is a really important issue. We need city government engaged, not being dismissive. If you don't understand where the people are on issues, I think the idea of having a town hall is an awesome one. You can hold a referendum. That way people can go into a ballot box. They don't have to feel fear. They can just check, no, I don't want a third rail. I bet you it would pass 99-1. The only person that would vote for it would be Norm Carlson. Okay? I really think that you need to get in touch with your community. I feel a real lack of that. When you go into executive session, please, 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 don't let your deliberations be 2 pickles short of a nothing burger, if you know what that means. Thank you.
Rick Cusack, 1126 Pine Oak Circle.
Good evening. That's a tough act to follow, Dave. So many good points, great points. My concern is, and I brought it up at the prior meeting, that there would never have been an independent counsel investigating anything if the action group hadn't discovered the lobbying collusion that went on in the city. I will also say that Ms. Jeter sat in my kitchen for 3 hours with 3 or 4 other people, the action group. We presented her with an overwhelming amount of evidence as to what went on with the entire lobbying procedure. And let me also say that Mr. Filippini at the present time is being investigated by the Attorney Registration and Disciplinary Commission. We will get that finding about his behavior on this very shortly. And whatever they come up with, I can live with. We're going to see if you can. And if, in fact, Mr. Filippini is censured for his actions, this city council will be held responsible. Ms. Jeter talked about city codes, violations, etc. She did not talk about integrity. She did not talk about intent. And the intent of this lobbying process by Schoenheider and Kiley and Filippini was to keep it off the books so that the citizens and the city council would not learn about it. That's exactly what it was. There was no analysis of that. Where is it? Where is it, Ms. Jeter? And I will tell you, Mr. Filippini's response to the request for investigation to the ARDC was refuted in every single point. Every single point he rose, the major one being, I was just following orders, were the same points that Ms. Jeter brought up in her report. We can refute every single one of those. There was a biased report. It was one-sided. It was a whitewash, and it just makes me sick. That's why I have my coat on. I'm out of here. This is just the most disgraceful thing I've ever seen. You talk about that wonderful Gordon thing. I wasn't there. I was out of town. But neither was Mr. Reisenberg, Mr. Tack, or Miss Marino, the people who have a vested interest in protecting their citizens. And instead, what do we get? We get insults. We get called drama queen and crazy bitches, etc. These women on this city council better understand that you've got a misogynistic alderman with you, and what he says behind your back, you'd better know about.
Next is Joanne Desmond, 1681 Yale Court.
I really wasn't even going to make a comment, but I wanted to have the opportunity to do so. I do want to thank the aldermen that attended the Gordon Center. I think it was helpful. It really made the people that have worked very hard on this at least believe that you care. And that's the most important thing to us, because what we do, I am old generation. I won't be in Lake Forest forever, but it's the future of our city that we really care about. It's what is going to happen to the young people of our city by the decisions that you make and you won't be here to live with. I did want to correct a few things, or at least communicate a few things, because I know how important it is not to hear the same old thing again. So relative to the PTC, the positive train control that the mayor referenced, you only need a positive train control system if you have a switching track. You don't need it if you have two tracks. It's only necessary when you switch one train for another. So it's clearly associated with the third rail. In fact, the Tiger Grant that I'm sure you've read thoroughly, which is Metra's proposal for federal funding of $14.5 million and a $29.5 million project that involves the Telegraph Road Station and 176. That project clearly identified in the grant that it was the beginning of the forthcoming FONSI on a much larger project. So it's coming, unless, of course, we can do something to stop it. I also wanted to talk about the safety issues of the train, and I'm not going to get into that right now, because only if you care enough to learn about this, there's a lot more to know. And the pneumatic electronic brakes have been eliminated by the FRA in December as not being cost effective. They don't save enough lives for the cost that it would cost to the industry. So the pneumatic electronic brakes that will protect people from these hazardous trains basically has been eliminated. So now we have Civil War era brakes on trains that when they stop is like a slinky. The engine stops and the rest of the trains keep, if you know physics, the rest of the trains keep moving. What we have here is a very dangerous situation. When you have trains coming to a stop, it's dangerous. It's not safe. It's not safe at all. So I just think it's very important for those of you who are entrusted with the safety, the public safety of your citizens, to learn about it, to learn as much as we know. So please, take it upon yourself to be educated before you hurt the future of our city for the young people that are going to be coming through. Thank you.
Larry Remensnyder, 251 King Muir.
Thank you for this opportunity. I've been in the petroleum business for 40 years, calling on refineries and pipeline companies. Guys, the city must realize the environmental and health-related impact. A diesel exhaust is a known carcinogen. The cars and the trucks now have diesel particulate filters on there to help remove the large particles, but not the nanoparticles. And once they get into the lungs, they stay there forever, leading eventually to cancer. In terms of the trains, eventually they will have diesel particulate filters, but it's decades down the road. As a result, we are exposing our sprouts and everyone, and you and I, to diesel exhaust, and these trains will be idling for hours and hours and hours, emitting these toxic carcinogens. So please think about what we do, what we live, what makes Lake Forest the best community to live in, and vote no for the third rail.
Thank you. Lori, can't read this. Tintin, excuse me. 524 East Illinois. Thank you.
Thank you. My name's Lori Tinty. I am a pediatric nurse, and I'm a professor at Rosalind Franklin University of Medicine and Science. I'm a professor at University... Better? Okay. I'm a professor at the Rosalind Franklin University of Medicine and Science. I'm also a homeowner here with my husband. We've been here for about 15 years, and we own a home about 500 feet from the West Lake Forest tracks, okay? Which is about 500 feet where the surgeon was killed a few years ago on the tracks. So, we have 2 children in this school system. We are very invested in our community. And I'd like you to think about the fact that children living near railroad tracks have a 40 to 70% increased likelihood of asthma, okay? That was a Mayo study in 2010, Mayo Clinic study. In 2012, the World Health Organization, as this gentleman said, changed the status of diesel exhaust from to a probable carcinogen, which now puts it at the same category as asbestos and also UV radiation. Okay. It presents the same risk as living with a smoker. It's a known cause of lung cancer and a significant increased risk of bladder cancer. Having had cancer, I would really not rather have it again. Did you know that unlike power plants and motor vehicles, the EPA does not regulate the concentration of the ultrafine particles from train exhaust? Okay? These are both known to cause cancer and asthma. So, as a citizen, I'd like to know what actions you've taken to prevent the third rail. Okay. What actions will you take to protect the citizens of Lake Forest from the toxic pollution from the increased train traffic? What actions are going to be taken to protect the property values in and around the third rail? What actions are going to be taken to protect the land in and around the third rail? So really, who benefits from the third rail? In conclusion, I'd like to remind you to remember the City of Lake Forest mission statement, which is to be the best managed, fiscally responsible, and appealing community, and to promote a community spirit of trust, respect, and citizen involvement. Thank you.
Catherine Richmond, 567 Lexington.
Hi, my name is Catherine Richmond. I'm 14 years old, and I also live in the Meadowood neighborhood. Yes, of course. I came here today because the third rail will create pollution that is dangerous for my family and friends. I like to take runs, I like to walk, I like to take my friends, my dog, into the savannah. I love nature and the beautiful space that the savannah is. I need the city council to get involved to protect the third rail. But I am the new generation. I'm a representative from the new generation that will come after all of this in this room. I am living with the consequences of this council's actions from this third rail. I have come here today because I'm a middle school student that has taken my time to talk to the people in this room because the city council needs to get involved to protect this third rail and get rid of it, please.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to make a statement? Well, sir, I recognize the woman.
I'm sorry, I didn't see her. You probably heard enough about the third rail, and I'd just like to say about a few things. I live very close to the third rail. I live very close to the third rail. It's going to destroy our...
Could you give your name and address, sir?
I'm sorry. Lester Hammer,
Yeah.
634 Academy Ridge Drive, Lake Forest. The third rail will run within 3 feet of our property line. It will fill our homes with carcinogens. It will knock down a 100-year-old brick wall that's about 20 feet from the train track. The land where that third rail is supposed to run is now 6 feet below the other grade. So it'll either be running trains like this, or it'll take a huge amount of fill to bring the land up to the same level as the other tracks. I live in a 77-unit subdivision, Academy Woods. This third rail will destroy our property values because it's going to knock down that brick wall. It will fill us with carcinogens, as we've already talked about, which is, are life-threatening. And everything about it just hurts. And I wish one or more of you would come out, and I would be glad to give you a 5-minute tour of the land so you can really see what the third rail is going to do to the 100-year-old brick wall and our property values. Thank you.
Ma'am.
Hello, my name is Christine Mulder. I live right down the street at 535 West Deer Path. Between my husband and I, we've lived in, well, I've been here since '82. He's been here since '57. 2 different issues. One, I'm a little embarrassed for a number of you sitting in front of me. I think the reason we need minutes is I've lived here since 1982, and I can't remember when members of our government have been taken to task like they have in this one. So I think minutes are important. This was a different issue. In terms of the third rail, what was it, just 6 months ago, a year ago, when the train came off the track and almost fell into my neighbors' homes? I woke up at 4:15 in the morning to find police all over the street, and then they weren't going to evacuate. And it was literally, if it had gone from here to that door, it would have been in my neighbors' homes. That's all I have to say on that.
Anyone else wish to speak? Yes, in the back there.
Good evening. My name is Catherine Galloway, and I live in the Meadowood neighborhood. I had written a few remarks prior to that. Reading that, I would just like to say one thought on this, the minutes. In thinking about going back and looking at the minutes and watching the video, and I'm not terribly familiar with this process, but how will I know if I want to find that video or that time when people have talked about this particular subject if it's not on the minutes? How do I know it's there? How do I know to go to that, time in particular to find the video? Anyway, I will try to paraphrase this a little bit to not repeat what some people have said, but I'm here to request more insight into your stance on the third rail proposal and some of the attitudes towards your constituents' feelings on this. I've attended several city council meetings at this point, as well as read statements in the paper, and it is clear there is tension, frustration, and difference of opinion on the approach to this matter. Citizens speaking out at each of these meetings, expressing their concerns over the proposal and even current problems they have with the trains, have spent a lot of time doing the research, collecting data, and putting together comments for you. Not so much as a means, not as a means to contest you, but, but rather an attempt for you to sincerely hear their genuine fears of what the future holds for them as residents of Lake Forest. Instead, we've been met with pre-written responses not addressing our concerns and not providing us with any substance to your reasoning. I even heard it myself when the mayor essentially, I'm going to have to paraphrase you, Mayor, but you did say in one of those pre-written statements that this really isn't an issue to discuss further or not worthy of the discussion because it'll never happen. They'll never get the funding, at least not in my lifetime. I'll probably live another 25 years or so, and it probably won't happen during then. Well, so I'm just supposed to expect that my livelihood might change here because it probably won't happen. Should I tell that to my 3-year-old or my 6-year-old? Because I think that I hope, will live another 25 years, and me too. I don't think it's acceptable in anybody's lifetime to have this third rail. There are 7 schools the third rail will run in close proximity to, 7 in that 3 miles. Approximately 1,300 children, not including the high schoolers and soccer players visiting the West Campus, exposed to the effects of idling freight trains. And as you know, also highly sensitive open lands, plant and wildlife species and watersheds. How is it we can talk for hours at length about the aesthetics of a car wash, but not extremely hazardous and risky nature of idling freight trains and a congested rail corridor during a time when our country seems to be cutting back on the safety and regulation enforcement of trains? Furthermore, I do resent Alderman Tack, your comment that those January 16th minutes and our comments, you made some sort of remark that they didn't matter. That's insinuating that all of these concerns don't matter. That's so insulting. I assume you're aware there are no restrictions for the lengths of which freight trains can idle for. Some have been known to do it for 72 hours. The locomotives never shut down. How would you feel about a Metro train sitting at the East Lake Forest Station for 3 days? There's more. I'll save it for next time. Thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone else wish to speak? Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name's Diane Casuto. I live at 1200 Wild Rose Lane. I'm a recent newcomer to Lake Forest. I've only been here about 2.5 years now. And I'd like to stress Joanne Desmond's words about trying to educate ourselves more about the third rail. I personally am trying to educate myself more about the third rail. I don't know a whole lot about it. I've been reading everything I can, but something did strike me that I want to learn more about is what it's going to mean to our railroad crossings if this thing really comes through and freight trains actually have to stop to let other trains pass, and how long our crossings are going to be done in that regard, and what that's going to mean for our emergency vehicles to travel across from east to west Lake Forest and back again. I mean, I feel pretty blessed because I have the fire station on my side of the tracks, but the police station is on the opposite side of the tracks. And I have to tell you, if those freight trains, if those crossings are down for 10 minutes even, they could be, if those freight trains have to come to a complete stop, and they're right there at the station, and then they have to get started again, emergency vehicles are going to have a hell of a time trying to cross over, or they're going to have to cross through Conway Farms, okay, from Route 60 over to Everett to get across. I mean, that's minutes that can be lost for emergency reasons. So I think this is also something we should put in the whole safety issue and something we consider. Thank you.
Any other public comments?
Mayor Lansing, forgive me. I know we've got a lot going on, but I was just thinking of Catherine's comment about how you get information. And just very quickly, the agendas for these meetings are always on this. So if you go to the city's website and you go to government and boards and commissions, and I know somebody here would be happy to help you with it. So before the meeting. No, I'm not. I'm talking about the agenda. So then when people are going to talk, it's where you're talking tonight, in that citizens making comments section. Sometimes there'll be a whole discussion and the citizens will be there afterwards, but they'll always, almost always, I think, this section. So if you look at the agenda, then when you go to the tape of the meeting, which comes the next day, can be about a day, you pick it up the next, sometimes earlier, half a day, you can go online again, and if you go to the section that says I want to, then you go to I want to watch. And then you do, and it tells you the various meetings, all sorts of, various things that you can watch. These things are archived forever. You could go back pretty far if you wanted to. But you know the date. And then what you do, there's usually a stream at the bottom of it that kind of shows you what's going on. But the meeting will follow the agenda. So, I mean, I do a lot in my computer about, pulling it back and forth to try to get the right thing. But it's pretty clear because the video will be of people at the mic. So then that's likely to be, unless it's city staff, that's likely to be when the citizens are speaking. So you have to do a little hunting for it, but it's pretty, you know, it's really desirable to watch the meetings. I think the minutes are great, but it's really desirable, and you don't have to wait until the minutes of the previous meeting. Does this make sense to you? Yeah. You look at the agenda and pull it from there.
No, I really appreciate that, thank you. I think I was more referring to the specific topic.
Okay, so you can't tell ahead of time unless people, what they're talking about. Okay, but,
Okay, can we
Okay.
maybe move on?
yeah. That's this, when the citizens talk about non-agenda items. Okay, I just wanted to be sure that people know we're trying to make it easy for you to find stuff. Okay, sorry, Mayor Lansing.
Can I make one statement? After listening to these comments, I don't think that residents understand the position of city council. We are opposed to a person, to a council person. We are opposed to the third rail and additional freight trains. Let me say that again.
Can I clap?
Let me say that again. Should we clap? We are opposed, okay, we don't have the time to get into that. I actually, now, don't make me sad. Don't make me sad that I said that. I actually think that Melanie has a good idea. Putting it on the agenda and saying the same things that we said all along, I think is incorrect. I think Melanie has a great idea to get the League of Women Voters, get us all together, and see if we can't come together on this. But I want to say this, because nobody seems to understand. City council, to a person, is opposed to the third rail and additional freight trains. Now, we're going to hopefully agenda the meeting, and because we have to go into executive session.
How are you doing? How are you doing?
The
Mr. Mayor?
next
Mr. Mayor?
item, city manager.
May I ask
have
the
omnibus?
indulgence of the city council for 1 minute, because I'd like to make a couple of comments regarding the special counsel's report, if you would. First, I'd like to thank the city council for its extensive time commitment to this matter. I know that you've met for many hours and are thoroughly reviewing all the facts and the information brought before you. As always, you're taking your responsibility very seriously and with the best interests of the community in mind. I'm sorry for this purchasing procedure oversight and the disruption that it has caused. I want to assure you.
Rob, can you call the meeting?
Can you people have some politeness? Come
I
on.
think they know what
really.
he's, but Rob, I don't think people understood what was
Yes,
going
I
on
know.
here.
Bob, could you go on? Unfortunately, due to some rudeness here. Please.
Okay,
Please do.
thank you. As I said, I'm sorry for this purchasing procedure oversight and the disruption that it caused, but I want to assure you, and I'd like to assure the community, that this is not reflective of who I am or who this organization is. I'd like to underscore that my oversight should not reflect poorly on our finance department or our city employees. We all take our fiduciary responsibilities very seriously, which I believe is evidenced in our strong financial position of this city and our AAA bond rating. With that being said, we are a learning organization, always striving to improve and do better. And I've learned from this experience, and I look forward to working with Alderman Morris implementing the financial process improvements that he has previously outlined. Once again, I want to thank you for your time, your dedication, and unwavering commitment to the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob, very much. Much appreciated and understood. Next item on the council agenda is items for omnibus vote consideration. We have 4 items today. One is approval of the February 5th, 2018 City Council meeting minutes. Number 2, authorization to transfer donation for improvements at Deer Path Golf Course to the Friends of Lake Forest Parks and Recreation. 3, consideration of an ordinance approving a recommendation from the Building Review Board. This is a first reading, and if desired by council, final approval can be given. Fourth, award of a contract for the City of Lake Forest to extend MPI tree pruning services for additional tree pruning in fiscal year 2018. As before, any of these items can be taken and voted on separately. Are there any comments, questions, thoughts on these 4 items?
I did have a proposed amendment to the minutes. Hopefully Alderman Tack will bear with me. But I thought the paragraph.
Do I have a
about
choice?
Comments that needed clarification.
Right, I think that was included in the email that went out yesterday afternoon as well.
Right. All right, so with that modification that was presented to us yesterday by email, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
This is a roll call vote. City Clerk?
I have a question. So are we voting on the amendments as amended by Alderman Bushman?
The omnibus as amended by Alderman Bushman.
The minutes,
The minutes.
the omnibus agenda, including the minutes as amended by Alderman Bushman.
And that's the minutes of February 5th,
5.
not the January ones discussed earlier.
Because I wasn't here, but I go back to what Alderman Tack was saying. I understand about editing the minutes, but I'm concerned about editing them in this fashion, where you're going back and kind of restating what was intended without actually having the verbatim information there. So I'm troubled by that part. So I don't know if we can.
I'm assuming this is verbatim.
Yeah.
I assume that you are actually noting
Matter of
verbatim
fact,
what you
there was a
said.
newspaper article that said it, similar to what I said in the minutes, and they copied it.
So it is
So, no,
verbatim?
I do feel,
Okay.
because,
This is
I made a
Okay.
point at that meeting, and
Different
somehow it
minutes.
didn't get picked up at that, in the minutes. It
Okay.
was the subject
All
of the
right, then.
discussion.
Yeah, the proposed amendments to the February 5th minutes are just reflective of Alderman Bushman's comments at that meeting.
Okay. Good.
Okay. So we have a motion, we have a second. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman Beidler?
Aye.
Alderman Morris?
Aye.
Alderman Rummel?
Aye.
Alderman Tack?
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg? Alderman Moreno?
Aye.
Alderman Bushman?
Aye.
7 yeas, 0 nay, motion carries.
Next item on the agenda is, well, there being no ordinances to discuss, we'll go to number 7, new business. Approval of a resolution reauthorizing membership in the Lake County Major Crime Task Force to be presented by Chief of Police Carl Waldorf.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. As you're aware, from time to time, I come before you to ask you to endorse an agreement with one of the many partners that help us further our mission. I don't think I have to explain to you the value of the Major Crimes Task Force, particularly in the last 4 months, and their thousands of hours of work on our behalf since October. For about the last 9 months, a working group of Lake County city managers and chiefs of police have been going over the task force's bylaws with an eye towards improving some tools in the bylaws to help us and the task force defend ourselves from any potential future litigation. There are 2 major changes to the bylaws and then several small housekeeping changes. The 2 large changes in this agreement, the first would be for the task force to begin purchasing insurance on its own to act as a buffer between us and a potential plaintiff. Currently, the task force relies on the insurance of member communities in the event of litigation. And the problem with that, simply from an administrative standpoint, is it often prevents a unified defense of the different respondents. So that's the first change. The second would be a mandate in the bylaws that all the member communities maintain a certain level of insurance on their own. In the past, 1 or more communities have not had insurance at time of litigation. It's proven to be a problem in defense as well. The additional changes to the bylaws are really sort of the small housekeeping changes over years that have been in the to-do list. If you have any questions, I'd certainly like to answer them.
Well, the changes make sense. As a graduate of the Lake Forest Police Academy and learning a lot about the Major Crimes Task Force, we get an enormous amount of benefit for this multi-community. How many communities roughly are on?
Every community but one in Lake County is a
In
member,
Lake
so roughly
County is a member of
35,
this,
as well as the state police and the state's attorney's office.
To do work that really no one community could muster in the event of major crimes and all the higher scrutiny that such crimes warrant and require, certainly in the courts.
Mr. Mayor? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
I just want to recognize two people, actually. First, Chief Waldorf, who has taken a very instrumental role in helping with the Major Crimes Task Force get us to this point. It was no simple task, and he put a lot of hours into it, and we appreciate that very much. The second is, actually, Alderman Bushman will remember this conversation when he was chairman of the legal committee, and what really sort of instigated this relook at it, because for those of you that have been around a while on the council, you recall that the city was involved in litigation as a result of a very limited role we had, but unfortunately, we had deep pockets through our insurance carrier, and we ended up having a rather sizable claim. And it was the legal committee that said, we need to look at this and restructure this, and that began conversations that ultimately have led us here this evening. So I think both the chief and Alderman Bushman should be recognized for that, and the legal committee should be recognized for that, for helping us get to this point, because this is going to provide badly needed protections going forward.
Terrific.
Your comments are misplaced with me, but again, the chief and everyone else, but yeah, it was a problem with insurance coverage, what we had to bear versus our responsibility for the one incident, which was a major case and a major problem.
Well, I applaud the persistence and the nitty-gritty details, because those are what kill you.
Has the task force itself ever been the subject of a loss?
Well, the task force is often named in lawsuits. As an intergovernmental agreement, its generally position is they ask to be removed from a task force because they're not in itself an entity. The task force itself has almost no assets. What it really is a legal framework for police departments to help each other. So the net assets of the task force itself are fairly insignificant. And so up until this point, they haven't had their own insurance. But that's obviously a complicating factor when it comes to coordinating a defense among communities that have different insurance carriers. So.
Right. Chief, we have had crimes that have crossed beyond our county. Could you talk specifically about Cook County and how the Lake County Major Crimes Task Force interacts on our behalf? Is there a role that way, or do we deal direct?
Sure, the task force members will go almost anywhere in pursuit of investigation that starts here in Lake County, and they've certainly traveled to a great portion of the states in the Republic. They certainly go into Cook County, all the surrounding counties very frequently. And they have a good relationship with the task forces in other areas as well. Cook County is being NORTAF, which is a very similar agency. So.
And I guess just a quick follow-on also to the north into southern Wisconsin.
Right.
Same.
So the complication there is always extradition, but that's usually handled by the state's attorney's office. It's really the investigative steps that they take are really the same no matter where they go. So.
Thank you.
No problem.
Well, thank you, Chief. Is there
Thank you.
any comment from the audience regarding this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the council and ask for a motion to approve the reauthorization of membership in the Lake County Major Crime Task Force with the amendments the chief described.
So moved.
Second.
This is a roll call vote. Clerk Boyer.
Alderman Beidler?
Aye.
Alderman Morris?
Aye.
Alderman Rummel?
Aye.
Alderman Tack?
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg?
Aye.
Alderman Moreno?
Aye.
Alderman Bushman?
Aye.
7 yea, 0 nay, motion carries.
Thank you. That concludes the agenda of this evening's regular city council meeting. City council will now be adjourning into executive session. for the purposes of discussing personnel, threatened litigation, and land disposition. May I have a motion to adjourn into executive session?
So moved. Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Alderman Beidler?
Aye.
Alderman Morris?
Aye.
Alderman Rummel?
Aye.
Alderman Tack?
Aye.
Alderman Reisenberg?
Aye.
Alderman Moreno?
Aye.
Alderman Bushman?
Aye.
7 yeas, 0 nay, motion carries.
Thank you. We now are going to executive session.